Yeah. You're listening to Autodesk's Digital Builder Podcast, a show that inspires construction professionals to innovate and use technology to improve how they build our world. I'm Eric Thomas, and I've been working in construction for nearly a decade. And now I have the privilege to sit down with industry trailblazers to hear how they're solving construction's biggest challenges and redefining the future of the built environment. All right, welcome back to Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. Of course, I am your host, Eric Thomas. Today, we are once again in the National Building Museum in Washington, D.C. And if you are an audio listener, I love you so much, but you absolutely have to head over to YouTube and take a look at what we're doing. I know I say this all the time, but I sincerely mean it this time. I am in one of the most stunning visual places that I've ever had the privilege of hanging out in, much less filming. And so you should make sure to check that out. But today we are talking all things recruiting, hiring, talent acquisition, and a whole lot more. And joining me to tell that story is Alison Tripp, a talent acquisition leader at DPR Construction. So Alison, I got to ask, and I think I know the answer given where we're sitting right now. How you doing today? You feeling good?
Feeling great. Excited to be here. Flattered that you want to talk about recruiting and you chose me.
Well, it's such an important topic for our industry right now. And I think anybody out there, at times, they're probably a little tired, like, oh, the labor challenge. Oh, recruiting is hard. But we have to talk about it because if we don't, we're not on a path to fixing it. And so I'm really excited to hear more about what's happening, where we're headed, ways we can make things better. But let's start this off. Could you tell me a bit about the roles on your team and the role that you play at DPR with regards to recruiting and candidate experience? I'd love just kind of a high level of what you're all about.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it is a hot topic and a topic we're all talking about. And I clearly have a few opinions about it and a little passionate. So I am lucky that I work for an organization, DPR, that about, I would say 8 years ago, decided that they really needed to invest in an internal recruitment team. And that's where I came in. Took a little bit of a leap of faith to go to, the wild company of DPR, known in the GC space, and took that challenge on. And so was able to build from the ground up, really, a team of internal recruiters. And so I have a team of about 24 across the organization. And they are focused in our, different areas, whether that is our, supporting our regions. So all the needs there from your accounting to your PM, supers, project executives. I have a bilingual craft recruiting team who are amazing. And I'm really lucky to have a leader in that space that leads that space because it is so niche and important that you really are recruiting in a different way there.
Absolutely.
I've got a self-perform recruiting team. I've got my college recruiting team. I have these wonderful recruiting coordinators that really manage our candidate experience, which is super important. And then I have some operations. I have an operations leader that really helps me with the stuff that I think not everybody thinks about with recruiting. It's not just filling positions. There's a lot of strategy, whether that's your branding or, what are your DEI initiatives? What technologies are you using? How's your process? And then also really tracking how's the candidate experience. So
you've just confirmed why I was excited for this conversation because everything you're doing is so intentional and nuanced. And it's really cool that you've had the chance to come in and kind of to take this from the ground up. I've had the opportunity in prior walks of life where I've come in like as an early proposal manager, like at a startup that didn't know how to respond. Every RFP that came in was a crisis and then they would respond to it. And it's kind of fun to come in and go, all right, well, this is how you should do it, and have everybody kind of step back and go, cool, that sounds good. And then the impact of that and being so intentional is just tremendous. So I appreciate you kind of setting our baseline there. And I think most people out there are aware that hiring right now is difficult. But I'd love if you could go a little bit deeper and just unpack some of these challenges that your team's facing and why we're having so much trouble either hiring or retaining staff in an industry that's so important to everything the world does.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Obviously something that maybe keeps me up at night and I think about a little bit. I think there's a number of factors, right, at play. And I was just reading an article in Construction Dive, which I really love reading the stuff they have there because I need to also pay attention to what's happening. But I think there's something like 440,000 needs for new workers in the industry this year alone, just to meet the demand for all of the construction projects. And so when you look at that, coupled with a workforce that's aging out, some of your more field, your skilled talent there, and then a shortage of folks coming into the trades. and not maybe a lack of awareness about just all of the different opportunities and career paths within construction. So you've got like a little bit of a messaging, a little bit of an outdated, I think, perceptions of what construction is that you need to tackle. And so you have to change that. And really, it's pushing in general, just for a change of encouraging folks to go into the trades, that is a great lucrative career.
Yeah.
And then also the changes in technology that we have to tackle and we have to look at there. And then making sure we're not losing really that, industry knowledge and that we have with some of our, whether we want to say baby boomers or the folks that are getting closer to retirement, which is a real thing. So capturing all that knowledge so that you can be training your younger talent. And then also the big part is there is a need in construction to change a little bit of whether it's the culture or the balance, right? Making sure there is some balance. It's a big thing right now. You've got to meet this younger generation where they are right now if we're going to retain.
Yeah, the expectations are changing pretty
very much
considerably.
so.
And I mean, with all of that in mind, it's no question that it's hard to sometimes find the talent that we need for these roles and to expand and grow the teams just to meet the needs of what our communities have. But on the other hand, amidst all of that, with the perception challenges we have and some of the logistics issues and everything else there, I still think there's a tremendous opportunity mixed into that as well. And I don't want people to lose sight of that because, yes, this is problematic in many ways and there's a lot of work to be done. But if we get better about showing people that there are great opportunities, whether it's in the trades or if it's in an office environment or a non-traditional background coming into the industry, there's huge opportunity. There's really great compensation and benefits, and there's career growth and stability because we need to build so much. The needs of the industry are tremendous. I mean, I worked at general contractors for a number of years. I mean, I ended up working and living in Dubai for a while. My first site walk was in Afghanistan. I have a degree in scientific and technical communication.
Oh, wow.
And when I graduated, I didn't know anything about the construction industry, but we were in the middle of the Great Recession. And I was firing out resumes and I got hired as a proposal writer, kind of freaked out because I'm like, I don't know what I'm getting into. And now, I mean, I'm sitting here, obviously doing this podcast, but I'm tied to this industry that I love because it's building and creating so much. And so there's a lot of work to be done, but I think we'll get into that in just a couple of minutes. But I'd love to hear a bit more about just the role that your team plays in the relationship they have with hiring managers and how that's kind of evolved as candidate expectations might have changed in recent years.
Yeah, that's definitely been an area that's been challenging and also just a great opportunity to shift that perception. I think for a long time, recruiters were order takers, right? You're just filling positions. There's an administrative perception that recruiters, that's what they're doing. And so it's really been, that was part of my goal when I came into this role at DPR is I wanted to build a team that was seen as a partner to the business.
Yeah.
And that they need to be aligned with the goals of the company. So if you're going, let's say, just for example, maybe we're building a lot of data centers. We need to, as a recruiting team, be aware of what's that pipeline of talent to fill those needs if you need technical needs. When are those projects hitting? Do we have a year? Do we have 6 months? So you need to be attached to the business, right? The financials. But you also need to understand what it takes to be a really good project manager on a data center or on a healthcare project. And so it's asking a lot of questions, it's communicating, it's collaborating with your hiring teams, and it's keeping them informed of the process. I think that's the other rub sometimes between recruiters and hiring managers. Everyone's going really fast. There's a lot of noise in recruiting. You have candidates, you have managers, you have me saying, where are you with your numbers? How many candidates in the pipeline? You've got branding, we've got people, coming in with Glassdoor. There's all these things to manage. You need to make sure that you're communicating with your hiring managers why we need to move at a certain pace through the process so we're not losing candidates because of the competition being so fierce now and more opportunities. And then keeping your candidates informed. There's nothing worse, right? If your candidates don't know what's happening, it damages your brand. So there's a lot of, I look at my recruiters as brand ambassadors, but also they need to be business partners. And for me, I have to really make sure I'm paying attention to where the business is going, what's happening with technology, just what's happening in the industry. And so there's a shift, I think I said, from like order takers to being better aligned with your business and being partners.
But it has such an impact. I mean, I can think back when I was looking for work and the moments where you're working with a good recruiter and recruiting team and the moments that you're working with one that might not be as empowered to be as effective or have the experience or perspective, it's such a dramatic shift between those two. And I just remember how excited I would get from those opportunities where everybody kind of had their stuff together in a way that wasn't so detached and transactional. But I also love how much you've pointed out here the relationship between you and that hiring manager and the impact it has. Because let's be real, most of your staff likely have never worked as a project manager before. They have never poured concrete. They don't know what those demands are. And for them to be effective in, initial screening and interviews, they have to become nuanced in a skill set that they most certainly don't have. And it's unrealistic to expect that they have. But you also want to make sure you're bringing in the right people for the job, because if you place somebody poorly too, that feels bad for so many different reasons, where you come in and they don't feel set up for success because the role wasn't a good fit, but they didn't have the visibility on it. But your project team is also probably a little bit irritated because you've brought somebody that doesn't sit into this role. And whether you have the resources in place to train them or not, that changes the trajectory of that job, especially if the expectation is they're effective on day 1 or day 5 or day 20, whenever, their hiring process wrapped up. It's a challenging thing. And I'm just thankful that teams like yours are being so intentional about it, because it's hard. It's not an easy job by any means. And I think the more work we can put in now to ensure that those experiences and the visibility and the communication are all locked in, the better the company and the better the employees are going to be for it. It's a win for everybody at the end of the day.
Yeah, I would agree. And just to kind of touch on that, I think, and we're working really hard to manage the volume. When you look at a company of our size and the hiring demands, it's very quick. There's a lot of pressure to fill. And I have to, as a recruiting leader, and I think it's something I'm working with our leadership team for awareness, is you do have to streamline some of these processes, and some of that requires some technology, whether that's a candidate relationship management tool, using AI in some ways in terms of keeping your candidates warm, or, taking some of that heavy admin lift off your candidates so they don't lose that human touch and that communication, because of how important it is and how much is overwhelming them. So I feel like sometimes I'm in the middle of making sure my hiring teams understand, you got to work with us here too. Making sure my teams respect how hard construction is, understand what they're doing on a job site, and spend time on a job site and spend time with these teams so that they can be authentic in what they're speaking to, but then also trying to look at ways to help my team manage that volume and that noise so we don't lose that. So it's something that we're in the middle of right now of trying to really, really improve.
And it's stressful for everybody. I have tremendous empathy for whether you're the recruiter or the coordinator or the hiring manager or just somebody who's on a project team who's short-staffed.
Yeah.
When are you going to get me a new project manager or PE or whoever you're backfilling for? Because we all know these schedules are very short.
You're getting faster.
If you're behind, and the expectations are higher every day. And if you're short-staffed, I'm sure everybody is freaking out to some degree. And the way that you tactfully navigate that says a lot about how your team is going to be successful. You don't want to burn everybody out, but you also have to meet all these goals. So I have a lot of empathy for everything you're talking about here. And it's great that you're so well resourced, because, I think a lot of folks, they might have one recruiter / HR person / jack of all trades for, back-end operations. And how on earth could you expect them to successfully navigate the hiring landscape right now and also do all the other things that you're expecting that they should do at the same time?
Yeah.
It's just not realistic.
And we're resourced, and it's a challenge. So it's where you got to look for other things to kind of integrate.
I'd like to click down into that a little bit more. And you mentioned earlier, you have a robust team of folks who are here to help bring in tradespeople, especially with all the work that DPR self-performs, which a lot of different GCs don't do. So that introduces an interesting logistical challenge. I'd like to understand, how do you balance the needs of, okay, we're hiring for skilled trades today. Oh, tomorrow I'm talking to a project executive. How do you pull in somebody who's not from construction but has something to offer? What does that look like? Because I could see it either being utter chaos, or if you have things streamlined, there's a process. And so I'd like to hear more about it.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it was chaotic in the beginning, I would say. And there's still days, I think recruiting in general is chaotic. If you go into recruiting without a sense of humor or the ability to be agile or handle chaos, you're probably in the wrong field. But what we did is we took a step back and said, okay, we need to have groups that are more subject matter experts in these different spaces, right? Self-perform, it's very nuanced if you're looking at concrete, or what subcontractors can we talk to or not talk to. And our craft labor needs to be bilingual. And there's a different pace there. And we need to be able to work in our markets where we are signatory to the union. So there's a partnership there. And then being able to help staff our project team. So I've really set our team up so they're in different kind of verticals that are focusing on the different needs of the business, so that they can be really those experts and partners. And then they're building the relationships with the hiring teams in those spaces. And then it's really creating processes that are more streamlined. And like I said, a lot of communication. But my team, my goal is they can recruit for any of these different positions. They need to know enough to be dangerous in every spot so that they could step in, or we need to pivot, or all of a sudden we have a really big need with electricians, or, that kind of stuff. So the team is pretty agile. And the other big thing of our team that I wanted, because I've been in recruiting when I was on the agency side, and how many interviews and how many resumes, and people are stealing your candidates, and it was super stressful and a grind. And I didn't want that, but I knew that I needed a team that knew their stuff and was driven and passionate without having those like metrics and all that, commission-based stuff. And the team is super collaborative. So they're sharing candidates all the time across the country, internationally, with our family of companies. They're supporting each other. Our group chat makes me laugh. If I'm having a bad day, I go into my team's chat. They're just such a group of people with like a lot of empathy, and they support each other and they cheer each other on, and they're just funny and they work really hard, but they're all the same thing. I think they take a lot of pride in, we need to have the right people, because if we don't, then our brand goes down and people aren't going to trust us. And so there's just a lot that goes into that. Sounds like a love letter to my team, which is great, but they're amazing. And I'm grateful to them.
But the intention behind everything you're saying, it really weighs very strongly in my perspective, because that specialization is important because it allows those folks to be more impactful. And let's be real, especially in the construction industry, people who are experienced in this space, especially if they're talking to somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, they notice that right away, very quickly. And it is very hard to claw back that first impression where you go, oh, you don't even know what you're asking me right now. Why am I going to tell you about this? And as you mentioned before, that branding, that sticks, and that's really important. And so when somebody can come in and ask a thoughtful question and show that, at least to some degree, they understand a nuance of the work that this person does. Because I'll be honest, in prior moments when I have been looking for work, when I've talked to that initial screen at the 30,000 foot view, sometimes those conversations are quite irritating because you're just like, okay, well, I have these questions. You go, I don't have any answers to those questions. And I'm just like, so why am I talking to you for 45 minutes when I know I'm going to have to talk to 3, 4, 5 other people? And that's not to say that, initial screenings are useless by any means, but they can be so much more focused if the person that's asking the question has enough understanding of the role that they're hiring for, where if they get a question in response, they can at least answer it or tell you who's going to be able to as they move down that process. Yeah. It changes the narrative so dramatically.
It does. And I think that's where the partnership with your teams comes into play. Operations needs to understand that your recruiting team respects what they do. And so we do boot camps. We call them recruiter boot camps, where we bring different leaders or different folks from different teams, whether it's VDC, or pre-con or prefab, and they come in and basically do a boot camp with our team so that they understand and they can ask questions, and they'll show them, videos or have little cheat sheets almost, so that the team, like I said, I want everyone needs to be able to speak to every corner of our business. And then if they don't know an answer, do not make something up, because you lose credibility. So it's okay to say, hey, you know what, I don't know this, but I can get back to you with that. So that's been really kind of fun. And it's also built some good relationships with our teams on the operations side, because they know that we're engaged and we want to know what's going on, and we don't want to sound like a bunch of idiots when we're talking to candidates, because like you said, they see through that pretty quickly.
And I love that you're talking about it that way too, because you're setting expectations for your own team on how they interact with people. And I feel like a lot of people aren't necessarily set up for success regardless of their role, because the expectations from the executive team down aren't qualified in a way that helps them do their job more effectively. And so if you're a candidate that comes in and interviews with one person, if your experience, if you interview 6 months later for a different role, is dramatically different than that first one, and especially if it feels like it got worse that second time around, you're going to be like, what is going on? There's a consistency here that's not there. But it just makes people more empowered to be effective in whatever role they're hiring for and the work that they do. So I love the focus there. And I'm interested in hearing more about employee retention as well. So I think that's the other side of this hiring landscape we're in. In years past, I know this from firsthand experience, not that I've been laid off, but I've watched a project comes to completion. In the past, most of those folks go, all right, I probably have about 2 weeks.
Right.
And if a new job hasn't been awarded in the right timeline, those people go home. And in earlier years, you could get away with that, where people would say, all right, well, I'll be back in 6 weeks when you get the new job, because the opportunities weren't there. That's changed. You have to hold on to those people, especially with self-performed work. And so I'd love to hear a bit more about how your team navigates and manages what's admittedly difficult, because there's employee satisfaction. There's so much into it. I'm going to stop now. I'm going to go for 10
there's
minutes.
Glassdoor, there's the internet, there's social media,
it's huge.
There's all sorts of things. Yeah. So we're lucky, or I think the good news for us is a self-performing general contractor with a very healthy backlog through 2028. Very healthy, which is good. Good, and also keeps me up at night, right? We, really focus on the fact that we need all of our, whether it's skilled labor, tradespeople, admin and craft, we need all hands on deck. And so we have to work really hard to change that, where before it was just like you said, it was like, oh, we'll figure it out and maybe they'll come back or not come back. Or we have shifted from that, managing it in an Excel spreadsheet that wasn't connected to what were the real needs or the real timing, and people kind of scrambling to really advancing that and using different technologies and forecasting model, and looking at where the needs are and matching them up to the people. And I give our self-performed leadership team a lot of credit. It's been a big priority for that team. And it's about respecting our people too, because if we, just like you're saying, they're going to go elsewhere. And that goes for your admin too, if they feel like they're not going to have something. So we're a company that really doesn't have that mentality of we'll just lay off and figure it out. We're of the mentality of we're going to figure out where we're going to put our people. We have enough work, and it's big for us that our clients, when they come to us, trust that we can staff our projects, and we can. Because if we can't, then we're in trouble. So it's a huge effort for us.
And that's such a balancing act for general contractors more broadly, with there's so much work out there to bid on at times. And how do you forecast your staffing to ensure that this project's going to wrap up, because we know it's on schedule, get everybody over there, we build our relationship with the owner. Oftentimes, if you've got a great relationship with particular clients, they might sole source to you. If they come in and you say, no, we can't work on that project, that's a challenge to navigate as well, because you've put a different perception for that owner. Maybe they were counting on it. Now this is going to go out for bid. They've got to write their RFP in a way they weren't expecting. And so it's not just, do we have enough people today, but there's so many layers. And trust me, I've seen the spreadsheets you're talking about, and they hurt.
I see them in my sleep. Yeah.
And I remember trying to staff for just proposals and such, and looking at the chaos of well, I think Tom has hospital experience, and this guy that I think we can get back, we could put him in because I think he'll join if we get this project.
Right.
It's painful.
It's chaotic.
And technology is getting to a point now, thankfully, where navigating this doesn't feel so challenging, and you can focus on these smaller things. Smaller things isn't the right word. You can focus on other things that are really important, like the candidate experience, like how the touch points look, what the website looks like, all these factors that play into somebody saying, I have 2 offers in my hand right now, and I'm going to go with your company because all of these points have made me confident in everything that's going to happen after I sign on the dotted line.
I think you just brought something up. So there's also a shift, I think, within recruiting, that it's not just all the buying, right? The buy versus build conversation. And it's now partnering more with your internal teams. There has to be a strategy. Your recruiting team has to be also tied to your internal strategy, right? And so we do a lot. We have a talent team that's focused on, succession planning and development, and do we have enough people for this stuff? And I'm in partnership with them, so they're helping me identify gaps. Same thing, we go back and forth. But each year we're asking our employees, they go in and they mark if they want to relocate, short-term, long-term. Just like you're saying, did you work on a healthcare project this year that maybe we don't have? And do you have this certification? And do you want to get into tech or do advanced, all that stuff. So we're now tracking that in partnership, and then utilizing technology, right, to be able to look at, all right, we need this many, we've got this many people, who's on the bench, who could go here. Okay, then Tripp, your team's going to go knock out these external. We're going to knock out these internal. And so that partnership, I think, is part of the evolution in talent acquisition in general, too, is not missing that internal piece. And so I'm really lucky. I have a really great talent team that is across the country that's helping us with that, too.
I love that you're being so intentional about tracking what folks either want or need or aspire to as well, because that's hard to know. And I think that really does come back into that candidate retention conversation, as far as you've made it very clear that if you indicate, I'm open to traveling, I think it'd be neat, you're put on a list of potentially, okay, we want a new project in Denver and we need staff here. We don't have somebody in this particular role. Are you interested? And I can also think back to just building these resumes, because I'm thinking formal proposal and marketing manager. You have a person who has a 40-year career and there's 700 projects listed in their resume, and trying to navigate how you staff and everything, it's hard. And how do you translate that into a resume that can be external facing if you are looking for work when you have worked on 700 projects in 40 years of your career?
Yeah.
It's such a nuanced thing that it's hard. You might not know it unless you're in the weeds of how complex it is. But within construction in particular, like, I think it just adds multiple tiers of complexity that other industries don't even have to consider when they're hiring folks for their company.
Yeah, and it's an area that we've struggled with, which I think any GC, large, small, has struggled with, just like you're saying, managing all of that and the volume, and then also changing some of those behaviors where a business unit doesn't want to let go of their talent, right? They train them and they've worked with them in, let's say, Northeast, and there's an opportunity in Colorado. There's always going to be a little rub of, ooh, well, I don't want to lose, Patty or Jimmy, and they're going to go over there, and are they going to come back? And so it's shifting that also, that it's for the greater of the organization, and it's also developing and growing because they're going to leave the company.
Yeah.
If we don't let them go to Colorado with us, they're going to go to Colorado with somebody else.
Yep.
And so having that dedicated team that's focused in that space too, in partnership with me, is helping us kind of shift that narrative.
Even folks stepping outside of the humanity aspect of this, where it's like, we're just being good to people because we should be good to people.
Yeah.
If you just have to put your accounting hat on, step back and think about, how much did you spend to train this person in this business unit? And even if they want to go to the Eastern Seaboard and live somewhere else or do something else, if they leave the company, that expenditure for the training and the skill and the knowledge and perspective, you lose that. But if you move them, you still retain it. You'll have to backfill, and there'll be a moment in that position where, there's some growing pains, or we love our schedule, or we have all this stuff going. But you still have to give people the opportunity. And I think good managers really understand that, where, okay, like, this feels bad for me personally today,
right now,
because I love working with this person and they're so great to collaborate with. But if that manager is a good manager, and hopefully they've been trained to be a good manager, they know to step back and go, okay, but what also is good for the person? We have to balance the business needs with the needs of the individual and everything else. And it's not easy. And I love that you're thinking about it in that way. It's really cool.
We're thinking about it. Yeah. And you touched on coaching. So that's another big thing for us, is training our coaches to coach. And part of that is having those real, honest career development conversations and not shutting them down, right? Being open to them. And then we're coaching our employees on how to be coached. So how do you ask for what you want? How do you, look through your personal or your career development? And so that's a really interesting partnership too, that is evolving, and it's kind of fun to watch right now.
And that's so nuanced too, because think about how many people who get promoted internally into a managerial role and they haven't been trained how to be a manager. I'll be very honest. The first time that I managed other people, I was not set up for success. I hadn't been taught how to be a manager. I was a very good proposal manager and marketing manager. I had never even considered being a people manager. Now I have 4 direct reports. And it was very frustrating for me to figure out how to navigate that in an environment where the landscape wasn't set up to tell me how to do this, what the expectations from the leadership were, how to communicate to my team very clearly. It's okay for you to bring me problems because I want to know about them, not to punish you, but because I'm here to help you figure out a solution. And all of this is so tactful in how you do it and how you tell your individual contributors and your managers and everything, that, like, I'm excited right now, because this is something that I'm really passionate about, is set your teams up for success at all levels. And that includes your managers, because everybody's probably had one bad manager in their career.
Oh, yeah. And I've been a bad manager at times. 100%.
Like I said, I was when I was a first one, because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And I wasn't told how to do it. And that stung, and it felt bad. And I knew it in the moment. And so I just think we can do better. And I'm just encouraged to hear that your team is thinking about it in this way, because it's not an easy thing by any means.
I think it's one of the hardest things you can do is manage people.
And also learning how to take feedback in a way that doesn't make you feel bad inside. Like, it took me a while to get there as well.
It took me a while too. And now it's funny when people would say feedback is a gift. I was like, yeah. I got everyone coming at me, and I'm managing 24 people, and I'm doing the best I can. And, that kind of stuff, you get defensive a little bit. And I've learned it actually is a gift, which my boss, if he's listening to this, will love me saying this. And that it's made me a better leader. And it's made me just more open to growth and change. And now I can see things and recognize them and be like, ooh, maybe that was not serving me well. And maybe, this is good for me and it's helping me. And then it helps me coach others when I'm recognizing some of that.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of us, right, that just got thrown into leading. When you're a great doer, you're a great performer. And now, great, the next step is to lead. Like, I don't know how to lead.
Yeah, nobody told me how to do
right?
that.
And then you realize you're maybe not doing a great job. So yeah, I think I'm really grateful. DPR is a big feedback company and not just once a year. It's constant feedback, which is also challenging when, I'd have moments where like, I'm good with feedback right now. Like I am full on feedback. You can send it to my customer service complaint center. And now I know how to receive it and how to kind of mentally handle it differently. So it's been a good lesson for me.
I can think back to being a proposal manager again and just the like sitting in a red team where everybody's ripping your proposal to pieces because they have to. But as a junior person at that moment too, it is hard not to feel real bad in that moment because we're working on a $250 million bid right now and 6 people just told me this is garbage and it might not be garbage and they might have used the wrong words because they're not delivering the feedback very tactfully. But just learning what those expectations were had a lot of impact on the success of things that came afterwards. But it does take a while. And those first moments, like it's a little bit challenging.
Yep.
I want to come back to candidate experience. And I know we've talked about this for a little bit here. And I'm so glad that this emphasis has evolved since I joined the workforce because I can look back to early moments where I felt like I was just a number rolling through the wheel and I might get an email, I might not. And I got through 2 or 3 interviews and never heard anybody again. And what's going on? And as you mentioned before, that leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And I tell people about that if it happens. But can you tell me a little bit from your perspective on how can candidates stand out in such a competitive hiring market right now? And I'd also like to hear a bit more about the brand management that you were talking about earlier, because I think it's a nuance that I think a lot of folks might not have thought about before, as far as you being a steward of the brand of the company in a way that, marketing might more traditionally have been in the past, or the principles at your company.
Yeah. No, those are all really good questions in a good space, and something that I'm passionate about. And I think candidate experience, it's complicated. And I think the rise of social media and things like Glassdoor, whether good or bad.
I've heard mixed opinions.
I've had mixed opinions, but if you use it the right way. So for us, our strategy there is we respond to every review, good or bad, and we address it. And then we take it as learning for us, and we share it with teams if there's themes or things like that, so that we can be actually listening and navigating it, because it is tricky. So that's one thing. But I think with that, what teams sometimes have forgotten is that we may have an amazing brand and you may think really highly of your company. That doesn't mean that the other companies aren't saying the same thing, right? Everybody's building something.
The sea of sameness is real.
Right? Or the same projects, or, maybe it's more money and maybe it's different things. And so how you treat your candidates, just like you were saying, in that process is really important. And it's really hard when you have that volume to drop a ball, or to not get that feedback, or to be chasing a manager down on feedback. And so that's where we've, put some folks in place that their full-time jobs are managing the candidate experience and helping, kind of push our managers like, hey, we need feedback, and push our recruiters like, hey, we got to make sure we're keeping these people in. So you can do that with the people touch. Like I said, also technology, making sure that the systems you're using are at least letting people know, hey, we got your application, or hey, sorry, not the best match, but this role might be better for you. So those are places you can use AI to kind of match skills and use that. While not wanting to be chatbots, I'm very anti that, but there are things you can do there. And then understanding that when you talked about your recruiters are your brand ambassadors, they are. I mean, they're the first line. They're the first contact sometimes that your company has with you. Your career page a lot of times is the first introduction, how that's set up. For us, it was really important that our career page also was bilingual, and that our craft and our tradespeople could see opportunities for themselves, that it wasn't just some just go to the job site and, maybe good luck. It was, hey, these are careers. Like this is a focus, and having your benefits clearly outlined, and your campus recruiting, and, making sure that everybody can see where they can go and it's easy to navigate. I think the biggest piece here with your brand is it has to be authentic. Whatever you're selling in the market, better match what your new hires experience when they come in.
Yeah. Otherwise, people will hear about that very quickly.
Very quickly, especially in the campus. When you talk about campus recruiting, you're on job site, or you're on their career fairs, and they're all talking. And if an intern has a bad experience, they're going to go back and tell everyone in their class.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to tell their professors. They're going to tell, whether it's the construction advisory board. So all of that stuff is so huge. And it's helping your leaders understand why you have to invest in those spaces. And a big space for us, I had mentioned, I'm lucky I have an employer branding partner. And we really worked on an EVP, which is a big buzzword in HR and recruiting, but employee value proposition. And it was, surveying internal and external to see what the perception was of our benefits or our career path or our compensation, or our marketing and branding. Was it, hitting the mark where we wanted to, where were we missing? And taking all that feedback and then deciding, really looking at analyzing your benefits.
Yeah.
Where are we good? Where do we have some gaps? Where could we make some improvements? Where do we need to wait? What's the longer strategy? And then creating that messaging for the marketplace that is, like I said, authentic and matches what you're doing. And then your recruiters are really able to speak to it. And your hiring teams, they have to also be able to speak to it. So that's been a big space for us to invest. And I'm excited. Been rolling out some of our new branding from that. And it looks great. And the team's excited. And it's, candidates are looking at that stuff.
And they can tell when you're excited and when you're not as well. And I just think back to some of those earlier experiences and navigating early job portals and the application tools that were available then, where I've submitted my resume. Now I have to fill out the same form 9 times about my resume. Nope, I've got to write this one again. And no, I can't paste it in here. I've got to manually write it out. And I can't tell you the number of job applications I've abandoned in earlier in my life, where I got in and I'm like 18 levels deep and I realize that there's 30 more levels and buckets to fill out. And I go, I'm not doing this. And even in a moment where I really needed a job, if it's this hard to jump through hoop number 1 and you've never even talked to somebody, that resonates too. I help friends with their job searches these days because I've been in the seat of a hiring manager and I've had a lot of good success in just helping some of my peers think about managing this and writing their resumes and how they sell themselves. And I always hear when we're having those conversations about, oh man, I applied at X company and it was such a pain to even get in the thing. And then I didn't even get a confirmation email that I submitted it in the end of it. And that says a lot. And they haven't even talked to you yet. So we have to do better. And anything you can do to streamline that process, I think, really makes an impact on just getting people in the door. And you don't have people fall off and abandon. Like I was, doing occasionally tour. I go, well, I'm not doing this anymore because this is too hard and it shouldn't be.
So I have to be honest, that is a place that we are currently in our strategy investing in because our application process is clunky and is crunchy, some of the tools we're using. And so it is right now we're in the process of looking at some integration of some tools to help us in that space because of just like that. I'm saying they're dropping off. They're coming and seeing us.
Yeah,
they're
and you
dropping
can
off.
see the data,
And
right?
So I can show it and say we're losing these candidates. And we don't want that to be a bad experience. And they need to be able to quickly introduce themselves and quickly get their information in. And so we're in the process right now, which is great. That was a big help me help you moment, right? So we're working through that right now with some different technologies, which is exciting to help my team and help candidates. But it is a challenge. But that is where technology can really help you too.
I think it's easy for executives sometimes to lose sight of this because especially if you've really moved up in your career, even if you move to new companies,
You have no idea.
you did not go and fill out that job form on the careers page to apply to the, SVP of operations or project executive or something. This is often relationships based at that tier. And your experience is so detached from what the average person is. And so it's cool that you're able to have the runway to communicate some of this upward again and be like, remember what this was like. It might have been a while, but this is important. And I think people are really coming to terms with this and the perception is changing. And also the urgency amidst all the challenges that we've talked to here. So there's a lot of work to do for a lot of different companies. I don't want to cast stones and say if you're early in this journey, it's a bad thing. If you're this early in the journey, you have a tremendous opportunity to be even better at how you bring your staff in and the experience you get, and you give them, whether they're an existing employee or a potential new one. So there's a lot there. Like I said, I'm excited because for me, it's fun to help people, find these new roles. And most people are really bad at writing resumes. And so I'm happy to help my friends out in those moments too, because that matters. You have a hiring manager who is going through resumes pretty quickly, and you have a really short burst of time to make that first impression.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think the other piece that we're up against, and it's helping your leaders understand that you're not necessarily like, just because it used to be, right, post and pray, you would say, like throw the job up on your website and you'll get great candidates. It's not necessarily the truth anymore, because people get annoyed by the process, right? It's cumbersome. And people are pretty well taken care of right now, especially the construction industry. And so recruiting team has to be looking for referrals. Referrals is a big source for us of bringing people in. But in order to have a really great referral program, you have to treat your people really well. And so they want to be connected and bring other people in to work for you. So that's the retention and all that good stuff on the inside. And then your recruiters really, I mean, they are after passive candidates. So it is hunting and nurturing, and whether you're on LinkedIn or, you're networking or going to conferences or going to events. And so there's a lot of extra work there. It's not just managing, right, all the applications that are coming in, not for all of your roles, for some of them. But it's a lot of that relationship building.
And that's such a different moment too, where you pop into somebody's LinkedIn inbox and you go, hey,
hi,
I know you weren't looking for a job, but I had this opportunity. And like, I've taken some of those calls, and sometimes they're interesting and compelling. And sometimes it's like, why on earth did I take this call and have this conversation before? But the experience that you have to set and the work that has to go in now, because now you're not just convincing them that your company is a good place to work. You're also convincing them that they should get a new job when they might not have even been thinking about that. And there's so much that goes into that, especially if they're happy where they are, even if they didn't really realize there was opportunity beyond where they're at too. Which actually leads into my next question. Could you tell me a bit more about how DPR and other contractors in this space right now are really differentiating themselves, whether it's with the benefits packages and like, what are people offering and what are the expectations? Because I can say very, very candidly, my first job in construction, my comp and my benefits were not great. And I'm happy to see that that's evolved a lot in the last 10 or 12 years. But I'm just curious to hear how those conversations go and what are people expecting in contrast to where, when you started in this industry?
It's been a huge shift. And that's also one of those educating your leaders, right, and your managers, that it's changing. The game is changing, right? We've got competition from a lot of the big tech companies, which has changed. They're going after the same talent pool as us.
Sorry.
I know, it's okay. It's okay. But there's money. There's different levels of compensation sometimes with that. I think where we've had to evolve is in the compensation space, which across the board, including for our craft, including for your tradespeople. What do your benefits look like? And we really had to dig deep on that and make sure that those benefits for our folks that weren't union, right, were matching, that you're giving training opportunities. There's a lot about career development and growth, pay transparency for those that aren't in HR and don't have to, lose sleep over this. Our laws that are going into effect all across the country in different states, where you have to post your salary ranges for different roles in different states. And I think it's great. Has it been hard and stressful, right? You've got to have your act together on our end. But it's increasing the equity, which also increases the diversity and making sure you're paying women fairly. And so it's raising the bar there. So making sure your compensation is strong. Looking at family benefits is a big one. Paternity, fertility, that kind of stuff. Also for us, sabbatical. I think those are things you can offer.
We have a sabbatical at Autodesk, and it's a wonderful benefit.
I did it this summer, and I didn't check my email for 3 weeks, and it was magical.
Yeah.
And you know what? My team survived, and they did great. And it was a great opportunity for me to also let go of some of my having to manage everything.
You go, oh, this all worked out okay, and I wasn't here for 3 weeks.
But there's a lot of burnout in construction. So offering a sabbatical and knowing that you're going to have a backup plan has been huge, and people are really excited about it. That's been really big for us. Just looking at kind of different ways that we can differentiate ourselves. And we have to look at flexibility. And as an industry, we have to take a hard look at ourselves. And now, where before it was more of a luxury that people had remote work, now it's more of an expectation. And that's tricky in construction. You can't build a building from home.
Absolutely.
But you can use technology to, streamline some of the processes, to cut down on some of the hours. And what you really need to do are build, for us, it's been really big on, we have to build a culture of trust. We're big on shared leadership. And so, your teams will take care of each other and they'll figure out ways to work with each other. And if someone needs to do drop off, then they can do the afternoon meeting. Or if someone, it prefers to be an early morning person. And so that's part of me partnering too with those teams to kind of build out teams and make sure that we're hiring folks that really have that idea and perspective. But you also need to talk about sustainability and global social responsibility, and what you're doing as an organization. Every different age group that comes in is looking for something different. And so we've really been investing in making sure we're meeting each one of those groups where they are and what they need.
It's everything
It's a
you're
lot.
outlining here is so different from when I stepped into construction. And it's just really refreshing to hear. I mean, you think about pay transparency, and for years that was like, oh, we don't talk about this. And you have to, because you have to make sure that folks understand, to make sure they are getting compensated fairly. And if it's all top secret, nobody tells anybody what the pay range is, there's no opportunity to figure that out even, and it ends up being exclusive. But just this flexibility and robust consideration for wellness and the impact of your role and everything else, it's required now for folks to even consider stepping into the construction industry, because you so astutely pointed out, the technology companies, they're outdoing a lot of the organizations. It's a very different approach to, total compensation and wellness. And I can look back, I've had a couple managers when I worked at GCs where butt in seat was the defining factor of productivity, whether I was doing nothing at my desk or not, and no flexibility was offered. And I was in a role at one point where I was living in Dubai. Our home office was in the United States, a 12-hour difference in time zone. We had project teams scattered out all over the Middle East. And I would have conference calls scheduled from 6 a.m. sometimes until 10 p.m. And for some bizarro reason, my manager at the time expected me, no matter what, to be at the office from 8 until 5:30. And if I wasn't, it was a problem. And I'm still doing the stuff on either side of this. And it's like, if I'm going to be on calls for 4 more hours tonight, it should be okay for me to be able to do that, because I don't need to be here right now. But the trust portion of what you're talking about here, and in really understanding, like, your teams aren't going to go home and just hang out and do whatever, because when they get back to the office,
Still going.
their project's going to be behind schedule now, and now they're going to have to work a 14-hour day if they didn't do anything yesterday. And so it's just, it's a very honest look. And while we're still, as you pointed out, we're building buildings, and all of that work isn't going to happen from my house.
Right.
There are still positions that don't necessarily need to be on site or on site all the time, or have more flexibility to be, half the day at home or otherwise, and having real honest conversations about that, and just not, pretending like we are.
Right.
It's the way to capture people's attention. And then also we get to showcase the perception of construction is not great right now.
Right.
There's so much cool stuff happening. We got to tell that story better. And I think, like your careers page that you were talking about, and all these avenues are small ways you can do that. But if somebody lands there and then they see somebody, working with drones, you can get a cool video that talks about working at the company, and, the executives aren't afraid the people in the video aren't going to get poached. And like, I've heard that before. And I'm like, we have to celebrate these people in a way that gets people excited, because otherwise all you're doing is just talking about building a building, and you miss all of the rich context there that makes this career in this industry so compelling and exciting to work in. Like, you and I know, we're in it, we're in the thick of it. I also admittedly burned out, and I don't work at a GC anymore for that reason. And so I'm really sensitive to that. And there's a lot of work to be done, but it's not unmanageable.
No.
It's just, we have to be intentional.
Yeah. And I think that's what I love about DPR, because I've worked other GCs, and I've worked for other companies that there wasn't as much flexibility or openness. And I think that's part of what makes DPR special. And obviously, I'm the recruiting leader. I'm a salesperson, but I'm also no BS. So I'm not going to sell something I don't believe in. And I've never felt as respected or trusted by any organization as I have at DPR. And I think the people, it's just a fun company. Part of what the secret sauce to DPR is, quite honestly, is our culture. Everyone talks about culture, but you have to be able to live your culture, and your culture just can't be a buzzword.
Yeah,
and
it has to mean something for real.
It has to mean something. And we saw how much people missed it, and what was happening there with that disconnect, or hiring people in that weren't going in the office or experience our culture. And so we've had to really be intentional in getting people back and wanting to be in the office, and having that blend and having that flexibility has been huge. And it's just fun. It's fun to be back in it with everybody, but also respecting people that they can make decisions that they need to make. and get their work done.
I'm encouraged to hear that we're getting better about that as an industry. And the last time you spoke, you actually had mentioned, or last you and I spoke, you had mentioned that you'd gone on kind of a listening tour during the pandemic. I'd like to hear a bit more about that and what your team learned and how that has influenced your recruiting process and just, the way, you live and breathe the culture that you're talking about at DPR.
Yeah. And funny enough, we called it Culture Con. So,
so it all comes full circle.
Yes. It was born out of the pandemic. And it was born out of feeling that disconnect, right? Of, like I said, we hired a lot of people during the pandemic. We didn't slow down. If anything, we got really crazy and busy. And we needed to get folks reconnected, and we needed to get reconnected. We felt a little disconnect. And so our local and national leaders, I'm talking our CEO and president, went around the country to every single one of our business units and had these giant town halls. And that included our craft population. And we had real-time translation so that people felt heard and could speak in the language of their heart and ask questions. And we made it a really safe place. And we got some really hard feedback, right? When you open yourself up, I think that's what I do love about DPR is they're not afraid to kind of ask those hard questions.
Yeah.
And I think people have learned that they can give that feedback. It's a culture like that.
And you have to build that so intentionally because you can send that survey out and somebody's going to look and go, I'm not going to answer that.
Exactly.
Because they feel like that's going to put a target on their back. And so the communication that comes with that in the expectation setting is huge.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that you were surprised by some of the results, but it says so much that you're able to step back and honestly talk about the results of that and then took that information and made changes. And I think organizations sometimes, especially ones that are generally well regarded in the industry, whatever industry they work in, you step back and you go, okay, well, yeah, we're this company, but you still need to make sure you really truly understand what's happening because like you have the individual workers who look up at everybody in the executive chair and you're like, what's going on up there?
They're so disconnected.
Yeah. And that's a bad feeling. And it also takes some of the faith away from the organization. If you look at that and you go, well, everybody's disconnected and that feedback loop is just, it's really cool. I'm happy to hear that, it was impactful and people were comfortable in sharing in a way that, empowered your team to step back and go, oh, we got to make some changes. And, coming out of a really challenging 4 years on top of that.
Yeah. And it was in 21, 22 and in January 23 was when we implemented it. And really it raised the bar on our craft benefits and our time off for, our non-union and just really making sure that we were taking care of all of our population.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we miss that and we can't. And that was for us just an opportunity. And I think companies in general, when you get that kind of feedback, you better act. And if you're not going to act, you're going to lose that credibility. Yeah. But also be transparent of some of this stuff's going to take us longer, right? Some of it, we got great feedback. We knew we could tackle it, but maybe wasn't as urgent. So we really prioritized what do we need to do now? What do we need to roll out? Being transparent. The language strategy really grew from us there too, to make sure, hey, we need to always have real-time translation. We need to always be communicating properly and making sure everybody feels heard going forward in all of our meetings. So that kind of stuff was really fun for me to watch and really, I was inspired by watching leaders that I respect, for lack of a better word, at times sit in the hot seat and be really genuine and vulnerable and answer hard questions and also highlight all the great things we're doing without sounding defensive and then taking it and learn and going. And I learned, I think, how to be a better leader from watching that. Yeah. I got to sit in a bunch of them, which was really pretty cool.
It does go a long way. I have a anecdote that I just thought of that kind of, it's amusing. When I lived in Dubai, part of the benefits package I was sold on was in the UAE, you're required to give everybody 30 days of vacation every year, which especially at that point in my career was a lot for a construction company. And they had to, it was legally mandated and they couldn't, not do it. And so I'm setting up my first vacation after I'd been there for a while. And I went on a trip to Mongolia and Korea, and I was gone for I was going to be gone for 24 days, I think. And that was wild. 24 business days have gone. Right? And I remember an executive who sold me on going to Dubai. He was part of this is the benefits, this is the pitch. He says to me, man, if I was gone for 24 business days, I'd be worried about my job if people weren't freaking out. And I'm like, excuse me? It felt so bad in that moment because it was so detached from what I had been told in part to get me to that position. And I still went on that vacation and I didn't care because here's an opportunity that I wouldn't have had otherwise. But that small example, if you're communicating one way and then when somebody does take you up on a benefit or an opportunity that you provided for them, what a great way to make sure that they don't want to work at your company anymore when they realize that there's some scrutiny going on that you might not have been aware of or even thinking of when you're
Right.
planning something that you're so excited about.
Right.
That stung. Like that,
Right.
obviously, it hung with me for a while. It's been over a decade at this point now, I think, since that happened. And I still tell that story on occasion when it makes sense, because it was just like, whoa, like that wasn't the right thing to say.
It's hard. I left an organization, and not that this is story time, and you may tell me to just be quiet, but because I used their fertility benefits, but then was told not to tell anybody, because if anyone knew that I was going to be, trying to have a baby, it would probably throw my career sideways. And that's tricky, right?
Yeah.
You're recruiting and selling a benefit and then kind of having a mixed message, which doesn't feel good. And so I think that's part of why I'm probably so passionate about any benefit or thing that we're selling or my recruiting team's selling or that I'm putting my name behind, because I feel like it is my name, right? It's my brand too. It has to match. And so I think that's why I feel so connected, and like it is such an important thing, because it does, you lose people over that stuff.
I appreciate you sharing that too. And it really gets into a nuance of our industry. I had an episode a couple of years ago where we spoke at length about, say you're a tradesperson especially, and you're on site and you become pregnant. How do you talk to your foreman about that? How do you inform your team? When do you inform them? How do you manage the work that person is doing in an equitable way so they can stay on project as long as possible, as long as it's healthy for them to be that, before they go on maternity leave? How do you ensure they feel comfortable when they're on maternity leave so they can be there for their family in the way that they should? And a lot of companies either don't even have any consideration for this, and they're not telling people how to even navigate it. And that would be so stressful. I can totally empathize with somebody who goes, well, I don't want to work in the field anymore. How can I talk to his grizzled old salt foreman who maybe doesn't have a family, maybe he does, but he never took paternity leave when he had his kids 15 years ago. And we have to be really transparent and equitable about these things. And I think it's so important for folks to hear the other side of that perspective in a way that really, truly resonates for them to understand, because that foreman might not, or is probably not intentionally being dismissive or talking about a challenging moment in a way where he's trying to make somebody feel bad, but he also might not realize that. And we have to help people see that in a way that makes it comfortable and equitable, because otherwise, in this example, you're ignoring half of the potential workforce that you could bring in for people who are going to go, I don't want to work there, because why on earth would I do that? I want to start a family. I want to grow my family. I want to do these things. And so it's not just salary. It's not just wellness. It's so much more. And it's really just about taking care of people. And not all companies do this or care, but the ones that do, it's so obvious, and those employees stick around. Like, I love working at Autodesk because of all these things, because our wellness benefits are great. The flexibility is tremendous. And I have a really cool job. Let's be real. Like, this is super fun as well. But it's just a good company, and they live what they tell people. And I love that you really own and live that moment of, I'm selling something and I don't want to feel bad about what I'm selling them if it's not true at the end of the day. That's huge.
Yeah. And you got to talk to your people. I meet with our women's field development group, right? Your ERGs, and what is your experience and what do you think we could be doing better? And, being in an HR leadership role, people leadership role, taking that feedback and going back to our teams and making sure, are our family benefits right? And just like you're saying, on the job sites, and could we be looking at vests for maternity, and, all these different things. And so I've learned a lot from that group too. It's been really cool to, sit down with them and get their feedback and understand what they're seeing and how do we retain and what's the real experience. And then educating our teams. There's a lot of like how we communicate with our teams and educating our teams in, the field and handling different situations like that.
And you have to be able to talk about it. I mean, I don't have a family personally. And like, where on earth would I have gotten any of the perspective that I was just talking about as far as like a woman becoming pregnant on site and navigating that, if I hadn't had the chance to talk to somebody about it and learn where there were potential challenges that I might not have been aware of, because I don't have that piece of perspective from my own personal experience. And so we have to be better as an industry in ensuring that everybody else has that visibility, because even if they're not intentionally behaving badly, they might still be and just not realize it. So there's so much nuance there.
There's a lot.
As you can tell, I'm passionate about this direction as well. So, Alison, I've got one more question for you. Ask everybody this, and it's one of my favorites. What's one tool that you personally like to take to every project you're working on? It doesn't have to be a construction project, but what's one tool or skill set that you carry with you everywhere?
Oh, that's a good one. I think for me, And it's something that no matter how hard I try, I'm just never going to not be able to do it. It's the humanity of it. I think I'm a people person. I'm highly empathetic. I care deeply about my team and my teams that I support and the company. And so I think for me, I try to center myself in that kind of human element. I have a really stressful job. And there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of noise. And it can be very easy for me in the day-to-day to lose sight of some of those human pieces to it, whether it's getting frustrated that we're not filling positions or getting frustrated that everyone's coming at me or not listening or, all these different things. And I've really tried to take that moment and make those personal connections to understand where someone's coming from and giving people grace.
Yeah.
I think that's been the biggest lesson, that I need to go in with the right intentions, that everybody is coming at this where they are and in the best place they are. And so kind of understanding that and just learning to kind of communicate and see people as more human, I think, is really probably my biggest thing for me and how I try to operate. And to make sure I'm being genuine, because I think sometimes as leaders, there's a perception that we're full of it, right? Or that we're just pushing a corporate agenda or we're doing all these things, and that's real. And I don't want my team to feel that way, and I don't want other people to feel that way. So I want to make sure I'm acting with, an authentic way and being real and true to who I am. And also, you just got to have one hell of a sense of humor.
I'm right there with you. And I just appreciate your candor here too, because especially when the stress can be so high, it can be easy to kind of detach and you go, okay, like we're just doing the thing. I got to fill this person, the seat, and oh no, 2 people declined their offers and we thought we had them in the bag and now we got to go back to the drawing board. All of this stuff is challenging, but as you just so clearly pointed out, we are all people. We're doing the best that we can. Everybody has challenges in their own lives outside of the work environment that we might see. And being cognizant of that alongside just getting the work done and being supportive, that goes such a long way. And I've been on teams where that was true. And I've been on teams that weren't so comfortable in that situation. And gosh, I'll tell you, I hate when people call work like a family. Like that feels icky to me because it's got unrealistic
it can be a little
expectations.
Dysfunctional for some people that have dysfunctional families.
Absolutely. But the relationships you build at work, we spend so much time here, and to just treat people like people and understand that they're likely not coming to the table with bad intentions. Maybe they have different information than you did. Maybe they're not feeling well today. Maybe a bunch of stuff's going on, and just figuring out, okay, if we are having a complication or a challenge, let's work through it and figure it out. And when things are good, we're just here having fun.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You got to have fun. I tell my team that all the time. Like, yes, we have a lot of stress, but we're not saving lives. And we need to have some fun with this. And we need to find some joy. And my team's really good at checking me if they notice I'm getting a little stressed or traveling too much or I seem short, because I can be a little impatient sometimes. And I'll do the, yeah. Like, just get to the point kind of thing. And they're like, hey, Tripp, we need our happy, joyful, fun Alison, we need you, and I'm like,
here
okay,
I am.
all right, I'm back. But it's a good check of, we can all get bogged down. And I think everybody's carrying something that we don't know. I think especially in the last few years that has changed a lot. And it's just, we just got to be good to each other.
Yeah.
And have some fun.
I can agree with you on that one very much. It's a great way to wrap up the episode, actually. And Alison, I just have to say again, thank you so much for joining me here. I don't think it's too hard to convince you to come hang out with us.
No, this is my hometown.
And this stunning space as well. So again, also thank you to the National Building Museum for hosting us today. Of course, you've likely figured out after probably an hour or so that I am your host, Eric Thomas. You can find Digital Builder on the Autodesk Construction Cloud YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you want to say hey to me, ask me any questions, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure I'm the only Eric Thomas that works at Autodesk. And until the next time, goodbye.